Hello everyone, Wowashkone here, and today we're gonna review the book by Vladimir Nabokov called The Defense or Luzhin's Defense. Well, that book wasn't definitely on my list of the books that I was about to read. It actually was presented to me by a person really dear to my heart, and I felt inspired to read it from the get go. So, I haven't read anything from Vladimir Nabokov before, and the only thing I knew about him that he wrote this novel Lolita, and that it has some allusions of pedophilia in it, and that's I guess the only fact I knew before about him, and that he also emigrated to Switzerland during the 20th century, if I'm not mistaken. Anyhow, so basically, Nabokov definitely was not the writer of whom I knew or read anything. So, I was curious because the person who gave me the book, he was and is such a huge fan of his works and his short stories. And actually, the book wasn't that long after all, it's even though it was a novel. So I got really curious about how it's gonna go. So in English, it's called The Defense. I don't know for some reason. And there was some weird things happening with the book itself. Is that it actually was published in English only 34 years after it was published in Russian, and the Russian original name is Защита Luzhina, which is pretty much Luzhin's defense. So I don't know why in English, probably because the surname sounds foreign to English speakers, it was decided to just leave it as defense. But yeah, the decision was made and it was published with such a title. And I think another funny thing that appeared to be that I found also as a note that was made by Nabokov himself is that actually he got an offer that he was able to release this book almost straight away after he released it in Russian, but the publisher that was offering him to release the book in English was rooting for him to change Luzhin, the main hero, from chess player, chess grossmeister, to the virtuoso violinist and musician, which Nabokov just didn't want to do at all, just because it will lose the whole idea of the story. While the publisher was rooting for this, I suppose, because it felt like chess is such an weird and elitist world which is not that common among the normal people. So if the main hero would have been a musician, it would have been much more loved by the possible potential readers and buyers of the book. I suppose this definitely was a business ask, but Nabokov was refusing this offer, and he felt that nothing must be changed about his book. This is his book, and I really respect him for this decision, because chess is a great sport. Yes, it is a sport for those who don't like to call it a sport, but I would call it a sport because it is a sport. Anyhow, chess. Right, I already mentioned that it is about chess. So main hero usually referred to as only by his surname, as Luzhin, and we sort of go in from his early years when he was about 10 years old, and he's living in a family, he's the only child. His father is a not so popular, like a second tier author who became famous, semi-famous, by writing novels that were based around, there was juvenile novels for boys about the age of Luzhin himself at that point of a time. And from the very beginning you wouldn't even know the name, but the protagonists of the books that his father wrote were called Antosha, which basically became a nickname for Luzhin himself while he was in the school. And it was a classical story of the child who's not really being understood by his parents, who's also not being popular at school, he didn't have any friends, he's been bullied, and he was this weirdo at a class where people didn't like him, and once they realized that his father wrote all these books, they gave him the nickname Antosha, and he was super not happy about this. To me, it all felt like, it's a juvenile stories that create trauma, psychological trauma for the main character, main protagonist for the future. Okay, cool. So then first we learn about the main hero through these depictions. I think the style that Nabokov was writing, to my taste, is he using such great and fruitful words where he may be combining the adjective that's not really usually goes hand in hand with the specific noun, but then he combines them, which doesn't really, you understand what he means but doesn't change the meaning. For example, like he used, for some reason I really remembered this example, bumpy night. Pretty much in Russian it was sounded like ухабистая ночь, which basically meant that there was no further explanations. It was just put in such a way, but it just was like the night wasn't really going smoothly for the main character. He was always waking up during the night and thinking about certain things, and he couldn't really properly sleep. Thus, the night became a bumpy night, which is I don't know, I kind of really fell in love with this kind of style that Nabokov has been using. I do think that despite it's really easy to read this text and the style that he's reading really quickly, it does feel like you may be losing it a bit in certain senses, because it sort of gives you so much information in the text, while the tempo is also really fast. So you read really fast, there is a lot of information that you need to go super fast. And so for me, as I'm usually a fast reader, it was it was perfectly sync with my pace, but I usually choose to read faster just because, for example, as I gave an example in Emil Zola's book, his tempo was super slow, so it was kind of a mundane work to read this all slowly, so I also was reading this fastly, and then it worked kind of fine. But with Nabokov, it doesn't really work this way, so you also should a bit slow down, I suppose, in order to enjoy this book even more, but it still worked for me. Anyhow, so we learned a little bit about our protagonist, Luzhin, who's actually being called by the surname because of his French teacher, who's been teaching him French at their house, was supposed to refer to him only by his surname, as it was a tradition in France, and that's pretty much how it was explained, why almost the whole book, until the very last couple of sentences, we don't even know the name of Luzhin. So then there has been a party at the place of Luzhin's, and there was a musician, I think violinist again, who's been performing at that party, and then he got tired, went into Luzhin's father's cabinet, and he took out a box, beautifully looking box, which turned out to be a chessboard, a foldable chessboard with figures in it, and he started talking about this with such passion and romantic notes about the game, that he was saying is basically the game of chess is like music to ears. So while playing chess, you sort of playing the music and sort of melody, which little Luzhin sort of remembers, and then it was kind of a good reference further in the book. And that's when he was first mesmerized by just looking at these beautiful figures. He wanted to learn more about them, so he started to go into his aunt's place where she turned out to be she knew the rules, but she turned out to be a terrible player. So there was a man who's been sort of in love with her, an older man who's been coming to her place waiting for her, but while the aunt was escaping from her own apartment, Luzhin, the little Luzhin, was ending up playing with this old man, and he taught him a lot of moves and how he should be playing the game. So it turned out to be that Luzhin, this weirdo with some autism, he well, confirmedly had autism. It's not like as if I'm making it up. He turned out to be a prodigy in the game of chess, and he basically left school and started to be touring around Europe. He's been taken care by the coach called Valentinov, who has been supporting him both financially and helping him to develop his game even further. So he's becoming this prodigy, and in his until probably like about when he turned 20 something, he's been taken care of by Valentinov, and his own family wasn't really worried much. Like, his mother died from some illness, his father was continuing writing the books until he also died, and then this kind of the moments of Luzhin's life was explained super briefly, and then we already meet him when he is 28 in some sanatorium, when he's already this huge, obese man, still young man, 28, with health problems, both mental and physical health difficulties that he's been experiencing. He met a young woman, which wasn't given a name in the book, who fell in love with them, and then he fell in love with her in the end. And then we are now coming into him feeling super anxious about playing the chess, all his thoughts about playing the chess. He's earning only little money for playing in all these different chess tournaments. He's still being considered as one of the best players in the world. He's been this Grossmeister. All the things he's been having are the chess. He doesn't know much about the culture. He doesn't have a proper education, of course. Only this couple of years at school, that's all he got so far. His whole life was chess. And only now there is this woman who found some interest in him and fell in love, and felt like, even though despite him being a weirdo, despite him being sort of illiterate, she for some reason fell in love with him. For him being him, I suppose. And then Luzhin also started to have these feelings and emotions. She invited him to her house to meet with the parents, and the mother wasn't a big fan of Luzhin at that point of a time. And it turned out to be that the girl was coming from a wealthy family, so they were living, I think, in Germany during the times of already when the revolution in the USSR has happened. And her father was a wealthy man, and they were first really against their marriage, but Luzhin still proposed to her. But still, all his thoughts were about chess, and he has been developing this super interesting defense of his own against one of his nemesis called Turati, which has been an Italian Grossmeister who has been known for his interesting, unusual style, and he has been unbeaten for many games. And Luzhin was just going crazy and mad about how to develop a strategy to actually beat him and win the game. So there has been a lot of talks about the marriage between him and this girl who didn't have a name until she became his wife. And simultaneously, there has been this play with Turati. They met in the final, in Berlin finals, and they were supposed to play together, and they have been playing for a very long time, and nothing really worked, and Luzhin was going crazy at some point of a time because of the fatigue that he's been experiencing for many days, all the sleepless nights that he's been trying, all these bumpy nights, as we already know, that he's experienced. He just experienced a mental breakdown after the game was stopped, so they haven't actually finished that party. He stepped out of the building and decided to go into the forest. He was just thinking it and saying some nonsensical stuff, which then ended up in him falling unconscious in the streets of Berlin, where some random people just found him out and brought him home. And after this, he started to go through the rehabilitation phase. Basically, his doctor, who's been psychoanalyst, told him to forget about the chess at all, despite I might remind you that it has been the thing that's made his life meaningful. Basically, no chess, nothing related to chess in his life should be present anymore. And his wife was also still girlfriend / wife, fiancé, whatever you call it at that point of time, was taking a good care of him, trying to go into different sanatoriums, again going through this rehabilitation phase. He's been getting support from his fiancé's father, who gave him the typewriter so he could distract himself from other things, because he wanted to write. He also started painting. He also was trying to do some other things to distract himself, but then chess started to slowly get back to his life. First, he found a pocket version of chess board in his inside pocket in one of his old jackets, and then he's been again getting all the thoughts about chess. Then Valentinov, after many years that he didn't appear in the life of Luzhin, he started looking for him, was calling him, and in the end he actually found him, inviting him to play the game. And Luzhin pretty much was still resisting. Despite his best efforts, his thoughts went back to full-on chess mode. He's again been going crazy, and during one of the nights, one of the parties that they've been having at their place, he locked himself into the room, and the whole story ends that he tried to escape from his fate through the window. And of course, despite we don't know the exact ending, he most likely died from jumping out of the window of his own house. This is also the moment when we actually learn his actual name, which was Alexander Ivanovich. And it all ends with the phrase that people were calling him after he knocked out the door. And the last sentence was that Alexander Ivanovich wasn't there anymore. So it has been a tragic story of a person who has been a proclaimed genius and prodigy, and through what kind of difficulties the person like this may go through, especially when there are some people who are interested in squeezing all of his talent out of him just by isolating him from the normal life that we all other people are usually experiencing and having. And that's, like, I suppose has been the biggest strategy of this whole book. However, I had this weird thought in my head as I was reading this book, and especially after the moments when chess started to get back to Luzhin's life after his mental breakdown, is that yes, his life was ruined because of chess, but it became such an integral part of his existence that it felt like chess were also making him happy in this sort of weird way. So, like, he was still looking for some distractions, and indeed the distractions, it wasn't as if he fully was able to substitute his need to play chess, his need to think of these different puzzles, his need to win all these games and come up with some different strategies on how to win them. it always weren't good substitutes, and it still felt to me like he truly was happy with his wife and by playing chess. And when he basically lost chess from his life lost the meaning in this sort of sense. So, despite him having such a hard and troubled destiny, I think whilst he still was playing chess, of course, he wasn't the happiest person in the world, but what is the real happiness when you're finding yourself in such a situation? Was it that thing that you has been doing your whole life that makes you both happy and makes you suffering from it? Is that something that you should try to be doing? I don't know, but to me it still felt that in most of the moments, and maybe through the gibberish that Luzhin has been saying about chess and about his thoughts about them, it did had a feeling in me that Luzhin truly was happy when he was playing chess, despite all the negativity that was coming to him for his mental health and his physical health, of course, as well. So, it's quite a short novel. I did enjoy it, and that also helps me to discover a great writer from whom I may read some more things. Perhaps I would love to start with some more short stories, which I already heard but haven't really read, many of them. So, for those of you who haven't really read any of Nabokov, or if you even have read Nabokov, you should definitely put The Defense or Luzhin's Defense on your list, as it is an exciting book that tells about the tragedy of the prodigies and how the whole story is made usually unreal unless they're taken good care of. Well, thank you very much for listening. Leave your opinions down in the comments, and I'll see you next time.